Good evening, everyone. For teleSUR English, I'm Sarah Begum in Caracas, Venezuela. We start tonight in Argentina, where President Cristina Fernandez's decision to disband the country's intelligence agency is dominating the local media. The president announced the move after the death of prosecutor Alberto Nisman, and many have welcomed the announced reform as long overdue. And for an update on the situation, we turn to Leo Poblete Caduti in Buenos Aires.
President Cristina Fernandez addressed the people of Argentina in a broadcast on Monday in the context of issues that were highlighted following the filing of the legal complaint by prosecutor Alberto Nisman and his subsequent death. One of those issues is the role of Argentina's intelligence services and the context of their relationship with judges, prosecutors and mass media corporations. In this context, the president announced sending a bill to Congress which has at the central point the dissolution of the current Secretariat of Intelligence and the creation of the Federal Intelligence Agency. The bill is aimed at creating a new legal framework of which the tasks of the new Federal Intelligence Agency must adhere to, in addition to setting a framework which fits to the national constitution, the human rights treaties subscribed, and those which subscribe after the enactment of the bill. The head of state expressed that this initiative is in line with the human rights policy which has been implemented by both the governments of Néstor Carlos Kirchner and her own. Among the key points of the bill, it must be noted that the new body will continue under the guidance of the executive, and she informed that the director and deputy director of the agency would have to be appointed by the executive and ratified by the Senate. President Fernandez called for a special session of Congress from February 1 to debate the project and have it approved in the fastest time possible. Back to our main studios in Caracas.
Thank you, Leo. And moving to Mexico, the case of the missing 43 students continues, with the government sticking to their line that the students were killed and burned. For this update, we go to Clayton Khan.
A day after Mexico saw mass protests marking 4 months since the disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students, Mexico's Attorney General Jesus Murillo Caram held a press conference giving an extended presentation of the government's investigation into the case, essentially reiterating their claim that the students were executed, cremated, and their remains disposed in a river by the organized crime group Guerreros Unidos in collusion with local officials and police from the Guerrero towns of Iguala and Cocula. Now, Caram presented videos of the suspected assassins confessing to the murders and how they committed the acts, including extended details on how the youth were burned in a large 14-hour fire in a garbage dump outside of Cocula. The authorities also affirmed that the organization of the crime group was constructed in such a way that not all of its members were aware of the actions of others. In one demand by social organizations, Caram said the authorities were preparing the charges of enforced disappearance against the public officials, principally the mayor of Iguala and potentially his wife, who are accused of being the intellectual authors of the acts. Up until now, the families of the missing students have called for multiple lines of investigations, including investigating the role of the Army and federal police, calling the Attorney General's investigation primarily based on witness testimony. This is Clayton Khan reporting for teleSUR here in Mexico City.
After the victory of Syriza on Sunday, today they announced their new cabinet. Left-wing economist Yanis Varoufakis was named as the new finance minister. Varoufakis and his team will have the mammoth task of leading negotiations with international creditors over the country's bailout. The new party has promised to change the face of Europe.
Everything is so open to discussion. Europe has to decide whether it's a democratic Europe that can incorporate democratic changes in member states. If it can't do that, then it's in an even worse situation than we think. But I don't think that is the case. I think it is a democratic Europe, and a democratic Europe needs to listen to the people when they have spoken. And in Greece, they have spoken.
Iraqi forces have liberated Diyala province from the Islamic State jihadist group, retaking all populated areas of the eastern region. The symbolic victory for Baghdad, which has at times struggled to push the Islamic State back, could clear the way for further advances against the jihadists. Iraqi forces are now in control of the entire province. United States President Barack Obama landed in Saudi Arabia to shore up ties with new King Salman and offer condolences after the death of his predecessor, Abdullah. As he travels to the ultra-conservative Muslim kingdom, questions have been raised about the West's support for Saudi Arabia with its poor human rights record. The nation also has increased its oil production to 9.8 million barrels per day, dropping the oil price considerably. However, they claim this was not done on purpose.
Saudi Arabia will not single-handedly balance the market on a downturn. We invest hundreds of billions of dollars in our production capacity. A lot of that production capacity is spare capacity that has saved the global economy time and time again when there were either disruptions or spikes in demand. That policy will be maintained. So the reason for the imbalance in the market has nothing to do with Saudi Arabia.
Israeli forces have fired rockets into Syria after reports of Syrian fire on the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Israel has claimed that the Syrian fire was intentional, not spillover from the Syrian civil war. There has been repeated fire across the ceasefire line since the uprising in Syria erupted in March 2011. Israel and Syria are still officially at war. In July, Israel shelled Syrian army positions when a rocket struck its territory. And staying on Syria, peace talks continue in Moscow with Syrian opposition groups. For more, we go to Nashwan Abdullah in Damascus.
On Tuesday, the Syrian opposition blocs continued to meet in Moscow as a part of process of peace talks underway in Moscow. The main purpose of Thursday's talks is to find a common formula before meeting with the governmental delegation on Wednesday. An official of the Russian Foreign Ministry said that the Moscow talks aim to find an internal Syrian solution based on the previous talks held in Geneva. The closed meetings, which started on Monday, have revealed many important points of agreement, such as the need of tackle the humanitarian crisis and the immediate end to destruction. According to the source, the so-called National Coalition opposition group will not be officially represented at the Wednesday meeting between the opposition and governmental delegations, but there will be an individual representatives from the coalition that will include Ahmed Al-Jarba, the National Coalition's former president. Nashwan Abdullah, teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
Alexei Pushkov, head of the Russian Foreign Affairs Committee, has denied that his country is intervening in Ukraine. He made these declarations at a Council of Europe meeting in Strasbourg.
There are no Russian intervention in Ukraine, and otherwise the Kiev government would have given us proofs about the presence of the Russian army in Ukraine. We don't see these proofs, and you cannot give these proofs.
And today marks the 70th anniversary of the Soviet liberation of Auschwitz. Survivors and leaders alike have urged the world not to allow a repeat of the crimes of the Holocaust in any form. As part of the commemorations, Poland's President Bronisław Komorowski says his nation respects and recognizes the role of the Soviet Red Army in liberating the Auschwitz death camp 70 years ago. Komorowski called Auschwitz a wound that is open and hurting, and said it had signaled the collapse of civilization when German Nazis launched a real death industry and a human being was reduced to a tattooed camp number. This could be the last time that a significant number of survivors of Auschwitz participate in a commemoration of the date of the liberation of the Nazi killing field. Around 300 survivors, some wearing scarves and the white stripes of their death camp uniforms, joined world leaders for an emotional memorial. They also took part in Kaddish prayers.
The SS doctors proceeded with the selection. Women able to work were taken to the Auschwitz I camp. The men to Birkenau, pregnant women, children, sick, and old people were taken to the gas chambers. The Holocaust collect its lethal harvest, and the tortures are not satisfied with the output of the crematory ovens.
A green thought went through my mind. that my body will eventually be burned in the crematory ovens behind the barbed wire, and that I will never experience my first kiss, as I read about it in a book inside Warsaw's ghetto before coming to the Auschwitz. Here are the concerns of a 14-year-old before dying, but I survived.
Hollywood director Steven Spielberg joined Holocaust survivors to mark the 70th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi concentration camp. He was joined by French President François Hollande and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, echoing warnings over violence against Jews in modern-day Europe. And in the fashion world, Chanel's haute couture view of the coming spring-summer season, revealed today, is distinctly storybook. Guests walk into a giant... Giant white origami tropical flowers, palm trees and banana leaves. The Karl Lagerfeld collection worked with bare midriffs, a floral dreamscape and eye-popping shades of electric blue, tangerine and canary yellow. More on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. For teleSUR English, I'm Sarah Begum. Good night.